Voidmage Gamer is now partnered with Flipside Gaming, so you can use the promo code on their website, all caps Voidmage, to get 10% off all orders $10 or more. It's a great way that you can support both Flipside Gaming and Voidmage Gamer's channel. Hello guys, welcome back to another top 10 commander video. We're going back to the guilds again. My personal favorite 10 cards in the Rakdos guild. Just gonna let you guys know there aren't too many honorable mentions aside from specific commander options that I don't feel are very good universally in the format. You have things like Grenzo Dungeon Warden that are a blast to play, but I just don't think he's a good card in a lot of other decks. And this can go for a lot of the other unique commander options that this guild has to offer, but we have a lot of good cards to choose from, so let's just start it off here with the first one. Number 10 is Master of Cruelties. I'm not going to lie, this is probably the most degenerate card on this whole list, but it is one that has seen a lot of play in Commander, especially considering we have a couple commander options like Kalia of the Vast, and also we have Alesha. Both of these can interact with Master of Cruelties, basically kill off a player, getting around the whole condition where he has to attack alone by putting him into play with their abilities. Even if you don't have that kind of interaction, Master of Cruelties is a force on his own, going to force your opponents to block with something, and threatening to put someone's life total down to 1 is still pretty good, even if you're not going to get the 1-2 punch with Akalia, one of the most menacing creatures you can play with in the format. At number 9, we have the only Planeswalker that I think really embraces what Rakdos wants to do the most, and that is Angra the Flame Chained. You have a very good +1. Rakdos has so many things that synergize with your opponent's discarding or losing life in general. It's going to be a decent complement to a lot of decks. The -3, even if you're not going to sacrifice a creature that's CMC 3 or less. Act of Treason is still a pretty good card if you can gain control of the best creature on the board, and the ult can be a lot of life loss. So overall, if you look at a lot of Rakdos cards on this list especially, and what Rakdos seems to do very well in punishing your opponents, Angra the Flame Chained is probably the best Rakdos Planeswalker so far. And we do have Sarkhan the Mad, we have Duretti, but these just don't really impress me that much. Number 8, we have Xantcha Sleeper Agent. This is a very good commander option, but also something that can slot in really well into a Rakdos Chaos deck, or any kind of punishing strategy you want to go with. And you could be kind of a pseudo group hug theme, depending on how you want to build your deck. But most of the time, nobody wants Xantcha, so you're going to end up pissing off one player at least. But the idea is to give it to someone who has an early start, whoever's ahead by a mile. If your game is turning into arch enemy, this is a pretty good card at that point. Xantcha has to attack, can attack you or a planeswalker you control, so there's a huge benefit there. Main downside with the card is that you do have things that can sacrifice. We have Ashnod's Altar, a lot of sack outlets in the format, so sometimes it may not be wise to give it to someone. You should probably just give it to whoever has a decent board state, who has a better board state than you. But a very, very interesting, very well designed card, and in Rakdos colors we seem to have no shortage of them. Number 7, we have Rakdos Return. Would be higher on the list if it didn't just single out one player, but even if it does only target one player, forcing them to discard that many cards in addition to getting burned for that much is brutal. Again, it's kind of like what you want to do with Xantcha, because that could be the trouble you get into when you play Rakdos. If you're doing this to everybody, you're just going to paint a huge target on yourself, but it's a very fun card if you're using it to get back at whoever's in the lead and whoever is viewed as the #1 threat at the table. It's incredibly powerful. The combination, we've seen a ton of burn spells that are like this, but not really anything else that can force them to discard that many cards. That's really where this card is powerful. And number 6, we have Sire of Insanity. This card is, again, very powerful. We have things like Waste Not, Liliana's Caress. This is going to do it each end step, and it's for everybody. So Waste Not is going to get you a ton of advantage. Liliana's Caress is going to get a ton of life loss. This is just a great card to play in combination with something like Nekasar the Mindraiser. You're giving your opponents a ton of card draw. You don't want it to get out of hand, so just force them to discard a lot of those cards, and I think you'll be just fine. A little underrated too. I think way more people should be playing this card. Even if it does end up hurting you, you do want to have a lot of those discard effects so that you can profit off of it more than your opponents. And then number 5, we have the new card Bedevil from Ravnica Allegiance. This card is basically a Rakdos Putrefy with the addition of being able to hit Planeswalkers, which is a huge bonus. Because another card that I hated for a long time, Dreadbore, I think it's still good as removal. If you're going to be playing Rakdos, you probably should play it. This at instant speed is so much better, and I'd rather pay 1 more mana to do it at instant speed because it makes a difference. Being able to respond to what your opponents are doing on their turns is a lot better than having to wait all the way for my turn. I may not even get my turn because they might just be able to go off and win the game. So I think if you're able to respond as soon as possible, it makes a huge difference. And this card is definitely needed. Rakdos already had some pretty decent removal, but I think it was just missing more instant speed removal like this. Having this versatility between permanent types, being able to hit both an artifact, a creature, as well as a planeswalker, it's definitely a better Hero's Downfall if you're in the colors to play it. Number 4, however, I think even if it doesn't do as much in terms of what you can destroy, Terminate, you can use it depending on whether your opponents want to attack you with their creature, and being a little bit more passive in a 4-player game is always wise in my opinion. I think the more passive you are, the less you have to use of your resources. You don't have to use a Terminate as soon as you get it. You could just wait, sit on it. That's why I love instant speed removal. You have the choice and timing. Dreadbore is a little bit more restricted unless you can give it flash, but if we're just going to judge the card at face value, I just think Terminate's a little bit better. Number 3, we have another commander option in Vial Smasher the Fierce. Huge advantage here is that you can just combine it with literally any other partner commander from Commander 2016 and make it more than just a Rakdos deck. You could go with 4 colors. It's insane. Vial Smasher doesn't do anything crazy, going to end up drawing a ton of hate because people don't like the chance of losing a ton of life. Even if it is random, even if it's not likely going to hit them the entire game, the worst case scenario is always the same player getting hit over and over again because a die roll or however you're randomly selecting it, it ends up not being their day and they get hit like 3 consecutive times. It has happened in my play group over and over again, and it can be quite annoying, especially if it is your typical 4-player game. But Vial Smasher is one of those cheap creatures that's going to sit out there on the field. If it's not dealt with immediately, your opponents are just going to play massive spells. They're going to cast spells on your opponent's turns. That way you can still get a trigger. It just counts the first spell you cast each turn, not just on your turn. So the damage is going to be spread around. It's one of those cards that it doesn't do too much, but if left alone, it can really break a game. And once you start knocking players out of the game, it starts becoming less random. And it does kind of help that you are able to play with partner commanders, so you can rely on another partner commander. It doesn't just have to be Vial Smasher, so you can just throw her out there whenever you decide to deal more damage. And number 2, we have Last One Standing. Rakdos doesn't have a lot of board wipes or really anything that can deal with an entire board state. Last One Standing is probably the best card we've seen in Rakdos in a while. You choose one creature at random, so you're going to have at least one problem left. The reason why you want this is because hopefully that problem is a token creature or something insignificant. Where this isn't really good is if there's maybe 2 or 3 creatures that are all problem creatures. You want to get rid of all of them. One of them's going to be left. So it's not going to deal with everything for sure, but the fact that you are only going to leave one creature left is still a risk worth taking if you're capable of dealing with the current board state that's maybe 20 creatures large at the time. I'm more than willing to risk leaving one good creature left and getting rid of the rest. So it's a decent board wipe, 3 mana. I think that's the standard. I mean, we have things like Toxic Deluge that are obviously better, but also that 3 mana mark. I think it's cheap enough, it's decent removal, and overall a pretty good inclusion into a lot of decks, not just in Rakdos colors, but decks that include more. And then we have number 1, which has been my favorite Rakdos card for a long time, and it still is. Rakdos Charm gives you 3 options, all of which are pretty relevant in the commander format. If you want to deal with an artifact, you have artifact removal. It's pretty boring, but you have it there. If you love the Bajuka Bog ability, you can exile all cards from a target player's graveyard. And then you have probably the best one. Each creature is going to deal 1 damage to its controller. So while the first 2 abilities are a bit more practical, the last one is really why I love this card. So you have a combination of decent removal, maybe you have some graveyard hate you want to get in there, but it's also a win con, depending on if your opponents want to go off, maybe create infinite creatures, they have a Kiki Jiki Zealous Conscripts combo, and they think they have you, then you play this card, and then you win the game. A lot of win cons, a lot of strategies in the commander format depend on having a lot of creature tokens, or just numbers in general. Having a developed board state can work work against them with this card. So even if you don't want to depend on it for artifact removal, it's still a good flashy card, versatile, having more options, especially on a cheap 2-mana instant. It's brilliant. It's my favorite card in Commander, if I had to say so, at least from Rakdos. If I'm playing these colors, I'm going to find a way to fit it in there. It's just a sweet card all around. But anyway, guys, that's going to do it for this video. Let me know what you think about Rakdos, the guild, your favorite cards, your 10 favorite. I'm Void Mage Gamer. You guys have a wonderful day. Signing off. See you all next video.